Three coaching changes on Friday as Bill O'Brien makes his move and proves to Boston College that he is serious about making big changes with the program.
You are Locked On Boston College, your daily podcast on the Boston College Eagles. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, everyone, and welcome. This is Locked On Boston College, your team every day. I'm your host, AJ Black of Eagle Insider, part of the 247 Network. I've been covering Boston College for over a decade. If you're looking for Boston College news, analysis, and details on your Eagles, you are in the right spot. Locked On Boston College is a free daily Boston College podcast available on YouTube or wherever you get your podcast. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. If you want to be right in the middle of the action this season, visit FanDuel.com and place your NFL live bets all season long. On today's show, we are going to dive into a big Friday. This is our second live episode of 2 days because it's been a packed week of news. Bill O'Brien makes three coaching changes. We're going to get into all of them on today's show and why this is a big deal and why they had to happen, and maybe some ideas on where things will go from here. Now, on Friday, Matt Zenitz of 247 and CBS announced that Bill O'Brien was making a change to his coaching staff. He announced that Tim Lewis, the defensive coordinator, had been relieved of his duties or fired, whatever you want to call it. And he's no longer the defensive coach. He also said there was a few other coaches, but I talked to him because I work with him. And those other two coaches that were let go was assistant head coach / wide receivers coach Daryl Wyatt and offensive line coach Matt Applebaum. So for today's show, we're going to take it one coach at a time, kind of go over what they do, what they did, and we'll talk about where things go from here. So let's start with Tim Lewis. Now, Tim Lewis was a defensive coordinator who I was completely surprised when he was hired because I had never heard of him before. I don't think a lot of people had unless you were an NFL fan in the early 2000s of the Giants or Steelers. He came completely out of the blue. He, was a guy that was playing, I think he was coaching in the UFL or the XFL and was, not a really well-known, coach. So it was a surprise when they hired him. Now, he was well respected by Bill O'Brien. Bill O'Brien talked earlier this year about meeting Tim Lewis at a coach's clinic that they kind of, had good connections. And I think he got some good reports on him. So he hired him. Now, the good last year, I would give credit to Tim Lewis a lot for helping Donovan Ezeiruaku go from, I think he had 2.5 sacks in 2023 to 16.5 last year, and really helped Ezeiruaku become an absolute game wrecker. The bad, there's a lot of bad. From the last 2 years, the defense wasn't all that great last year other than Ezeiruaku. This year, it was a mess. And we can have that whole conversation about whether that was because of injuries, if you think it was the style of defense he was playing. I think it was a combination of everything. Now, you cannot blame everything on Tim Lewis from this year, because when you lose Syer Torrance and Amari Jackson, your two starting cornerbacks, Davion Crouch, who is supposed to be your best linebacker, 3 out of your 4 starting defensive tackles, and depth all over the place, that's going to be hard on every coach. That being said, none of the guys seem to really develop all that much. Like, you had guys out there that were playing, and none of them seemed to get much better. It was like they were taking that next step. And even if your defense is bad, you're hoping you could see that. You saw pieces of it, maybe like a guy like Omar Thornton. But in general, just go back to watch that Georgia Tech game. Watch what happened to the defense in the Georgia Tech game, because it was ugly. They could not stop anything. And I know Georgia Tech had a good offense. But go watch the UConn game. UConn torched them. Clemson torched them. Pitt destroyed them. Whether you think this defensive issue was because of depth, injuries, scheme, whatever it is, you had to know at the end of the season, someone had to fall on their sword. And if it's not Bill O'Brien, it's going to be the defensive coordinator. And so Tim Lewis, unfortunately, his job is gone. So this gives you a chance now to do something different. And I think you need to go there, and I know they're going for an NFL style program, but you need to go out there and make a splashier hire than Tim Lewis. You want to get a guy out there that the recruits have heard of. if I hadn't heard of Tim Lewis, I'm guessing a bunch of 16 and 17-year-olds have never heard of him either. So you need to go out there and find somebody, maybe younger, but with a little bit of experience, who could come and help sell that program and give your defense an edge. So for me, there's one guy, one name that I think of that I think would be an absolute home run, and that is Al Washington. He's the defensive line coach at Notre Dame right now. This would be a step up. This would be a trip back to his alma mater. This would give you an excellent recruiter, which you need, and it gives you another member, along with Kenyatta Watson, of somebody with BC roots. I don't think that's necessary for every coach. I don't think that's necessary to make it a majority of your coaches. But if you bring in a guy like him, you know that that's something that's big. That's something that you can bring that would be, that you can sell to recruits. He would be great at it. You remember the time Al Washington was here. He was a special teams coach, and he did running backs coach. So he's done a bunch of different things. He's been a positional coach for a while now. It's time for him, I would think, to take that next step to become a defensive coordinator. Now, the knock on this, and the part that I can't get past, that I think is going to be hard, and we'll have to wait to see if it actually, if there's any interest in it. The issue with Al is that he was the guy that was a finalist with Bill O'Brien for that head coaching job. You're going to have, I know these guys all have egos. We all have egos, right? I would think it would be pretty hard to go back to the school that you got shot down from to be a lesser coach. Weirder things have happened. Money talks. Positional, the opportunity to go up the ranks is also there, but I still think that's tough. So we'll have to wait and see. Now, the other piece too is I don't believe Al Washington has any connections to Bill O'Brien. We know that that's a big deal. Maybe there's some other way that they can find out, if he's the right fit or not. That'll be something to watch for too. There's other names that are out there as well. I would look at a guy like John Butler, who was just fired by Nebraska. He worked with Bill O'Brien for a long time. The knock on that one would be that Bill O'Brien fired him. So it's like, each guy, there's no perfect guy that I can think of right now. I would also look at, it was Matt Brock, I think the defensive coordinator at UConn. They run a really nice defense there. I think that would be a nice get for Boston College. These are all the names that I've been looking at. And then, of course, there's the one that you guys all like too, Don Brown. I love Don Brown. I'm not sure he's the right answer right now. If they were to hire him, I would be fine too, because he's great in New England. That's great. But he's also 75 years old. I don't know if if he's interested in staying as a defensive coordinator. I think he was just like an analyst this year for Syracuse at the very end of the year. So I'm not sure he would be the right fit, but that's that. And, there will probably be somebody, that Bill O'Brien knows or Mike Vrabel knows that they end up getting. And we'll talk about that when it happens. Now, in our second segment, a coach that I think a lot of fans weren't happy about, but the players all loved. We'll talk about Matt Applebaum in just a moment. NFL Sundays move fast. One big play and suddenly everything feels different. That's what makes live betting with FanDuel so exciting. You're not just watching the game, you're reacting to it in real time. With FanDuel, you can place bets as the action unfolds, every drive, every momentum swing, every highlight moment. Live betting is the best when the game starts to shift. A receiver gets hot, a defense tightens up, they're getting sacks, they're getting pressures. You love to get in there, get that action with live spreads and money lines that adjust instantly. You can get that live spread that you're looking for, and you can bet the next touchdown score, drive results, all of that good stuff. So if you want to be right in the middle of action this season, visit FanDuel.com and place your NFL live bets all season long. With FanDuel, the game moves fast, and so can you. Locked On College, AJ here with an emergency podcast. I wanted to do another live one. You're here. We're talking about it. The other positional coach, one of the other positional coaches that got go on Friday is Matt Applebaum. Now, Applebaum was hired originally by Jeff Hafley back in 2021. He coached for 2 years for BC, ended up in the NFL, coached with the Miami Dolphins, got fired, ended back up with Jeff Hafley in his last year, and then stuck around with Bill O'Brien. Now, Many folks have different thoughts about how his groups have worked out. You've seen the positives, guys like Ozzie Drapilo, Jack Conley, Drew Kendall. He was around for all of those guys. But you've also seen the negative. The last 2 years, they let up a ton of sacks. And some of that's on the quarterbacks. It's not all on the offensive line. But this year specifically, the offensive line could not really open up the run game. And the run attack was like 126th, I believe, in the country. That was a big issue for Boston College this year. And, when you retained him, this wasn't a O'Brien guy when you kept him on board. This wasn't a guy that he had a good relationship with. It was someone that he probably respected and then kept him on board. So it didn't surprise me because the issues that we saw with the offense this year, a lot of that started up front. You have a guy like Jude Bowery, right? Big 6'7" offensive lineman, goes into the season as a rumored potential first-round draft pick. And you're thinking, oh, wow, you've got something there. You're looking at Logan Taylor and even Dwayne Alec, who's a guy who's been around forever. And you're like, oh, this offensive line should be able to go. Tell me something. And this is not a knock on any of these guys. Did anyone on that offensive line perform the way that you thought they would perform? I would argue no. I don't think they had. I don't think they did. Even, like Jude Bowery, did he look like a first-round draft pick to you? No. Did Logan Taylor look like a draft pick to you? Unfortunately not. That goes back to coaching. The guys, you saw a lot of, you lost games because of the offensive line. The Stanford game, the play of the year, the play that many folks point to as the moment this season went off a complete cliff was the moment that Dwayne Alec botched that snap at Stanford. Remember, you were on the verge of going up. Well, I think it was up, was either 14 or 21 points. You were about to go up big, and you blew it in the red zone. You look at other games, couldn't run the football if you tried. They needed to make a change here. The running system that they're doing, it was inconsistent at best. You saw times like the Syracuse game where you're like, yes, that's what we're looking for. But then you watch so many other games where Turbo couldn't get going. You didn't see much out of Jordan McDonald. The offensive lines made mistakes up and down. They're getting beat. There were games too. Let's talk about the pass rush and how ineffective that was against like guys like Dylan Lonergan, right? There were games where I think Mitch was saying on our show the other day that they had to get the ball out in less than 2 seconds. You're a college player. You're still learning how to do your reads and like quickly move down the line. And you got to get that ball out that fast because the offensive line is just falling apart. That again, coaching, and it has to go back to coaching. We can bash, you can say things about a specific player, but the buck always stops with the coach. The buck always stops there. Now, I would say too, just like with Tim Lewis, I think this is an opportunity for BC to improve on the recruiting trail as well. While Tim Lewis, I talk to tons of recruits, and sometimes defensive coordinators aren't the main recruiter when you're talking to a kid, but you hear about it a lot. Like, when Tim Lokabu was here, I used to hear about him when I talked to recruits. Didn't hear a ton about Tim Lewis. Matt Applebaum, I think there were times it was just not clicking for him on the trail. A lot of the offensive linemen that you're seeing out there that are committed, whether it's Merrick Jen or Dean Ruxnitis or some of the other guys that they landed, Lawrence Ayoki, I'm sorry, I'm messing his name up. Many of those were recruited by Dibs, John DiBiaso. It was not Matt Applebaum. Of course, he's part of all that, but he was never able to close on a recruit. Like Marky Walbridge was one he was the main recruiter for, and he's at Michigan. Well, you can't blame him all the time for that, but it was a pattern. It was definitely a pattern that the bigger recruits on the offensive line, the ones that were higher ranked, didn't always go for a guy like Applebaum. Now, I don't know a ton of offensive line coaches. I know one I would definitely love to see here, but I don't know what his situation is because he's coming from a coaching change. This is a guy that has experience at BC. And it's another one where I would say, if BC can fork it up, get him here now. Phil Trautwein. Phil Trautwein is at Penn State. I don't know if he's going to follow James Franklin to Virginia Tech. I'm reading up on it. I haven't heard his name linked to that. But if he's a free agent, this is a guy that knows BC. He can recruit. He's good in Pennsylvania, obviously. And, has been part of developing some great offensive lines, not just at BC, but also at Penn State. You got to bring him here. Again, you see the theme I'm going with these two coaches that I'm just throwing out as options. It's moving away from the pro style stuff. You need to, I think, in my opinion, you need to add a flair of college recruiting. And this is why I said Kenyatta Watson was a slam dunk. But if you add like an Al Washington, you add a Phil Trautwein, you mix them in with guys like Jordan Thomas, Corey Robinson, Will Long, all these guys that have tons of pro experience, you got a nice mix. That's what BC really needs, is a really nice mix. So I think this is another chance. But I want to also caution you a little bit on this. I know a lot of folks were really down on Applebaum, but remember the last time he left, and I believe he left with the same people complaining about him that we heard this time. Who did they replace him with? Googs, Dave DeGuglielmo. And that was an absolute failure because Googs was a disaster and had the worst offensive line at Boston College I've ever seen, will ever see. So again, Bill's got to be able to slam dunk this. Googs, I think, actually does have connections to Bill, but I'm assuming that that's not on the table because Googs is working at Stanford. So you got to be careful with who you get here because, yeah, Applebaum had his flaws, but it can still get worse. And so O'Brien better find a guy that can really maximize the guys that you have here. In our final segment, we're going to wrap things up by talking about the final coach that is on his way out. And one of the more important names, and I'll explain what I mean by that in just a moment. This holiday seasons are officially here, which means gift hunting season is on. And if you want something meaningful, personal, and guaranteed to get a reaction, Aura Frames is the gift that delivers every time. It's not just something you wrap. It's a way to share because Aura isn't your average picture frame. You can preload the frame with photos before getting it. So when they plug in, the memories are already there. No apps to figure out, no setup headaches, just instant smiles. I have two kids. Their grandparents live an hour away in one and like 3 hours away in the other. They love to see pictures of my kids. I load them up on Aura. I can get them, pictures of them at soccer and karate at school. They love it. It makes their days, and they love to know when there's a new picture for them. So for a limited time only, save on the perfect gift by visiting auraframes.com to get $35 off Aura's best-selling Carver mat frames, named #1 by Wirecutter by using the promo code COLLEGE at checkout. That's auraframes.com, promo code COLLEGE. Deal is exclusive to listeners and frames sell out fast. So order yours now to get in time for the holidays. Support the show by mentioning us at checkout. Terms and conditions apply. Locked On Boston College, AJ Black here. Thank you all who have made Locked On Boston College your first listen every day. And if you're an everydayer, thank you so much. Thank you for joining us on a special live episode. We've been doing a lot of these live episodes because news is fast and coming furious, and I didn't want to make you wait 3 days to hear about my thoughts on these coaching changes because I know you guys trust me. I want to make sure I gave you the info quick. Now, the last name that came out was the biggest surprise to me. I assumed Tim Lewis was going to get fired. Someone had to fall on the sword. The offensive line was a mess, so I could get why Applebaum got the axe. This one I don't understand still. That's Daryl Wyatt, the assistant head coach and wide receivers coach for BC. I don't know if he got fired. Maybe guys quit. I don't know. They don't give you the specifics on what happened, but he's gone. Now, Daryl Wyatt got hired by Jeff Hafley. He was also part of that crew, and he came with a good pedigree with him. Now, Wyatt came from UCF. He had experience at Houston, Oklahoma State. He's well known and respected in the South, specifically the Florida and Texas area. And specifically with Texas, I think that was a big deal because I think Daryl Wyatt for a while was one of your best recruiters. This was the guy that could get you into the schools down south, get you into the schools in Texas, the schools in Florida, and recruit Boston College. And he did so pretty effectively at the best that he could. There were many wide receivers from that area that ended up, committing to him. Even guys that aren't in the area. I believe Reed Harris was recruited by him. You got guys like Dawson Pugh and Nedrick Bolden, guys that you're going to hear from, frequently, I think soon. So I think he's a big deal there. I also think he was a big deal in terms of the development of players. During his time, we saw the emergence of Zay Flowers into a superstar, the emergence of Reed Harris into a star, Reed Harris into a star, and Lewis Bond into one of the best receivers BC has had in terms of some of the things that he could do. That's 3 wide receivers that you could easily put as some of the better ones that you've seen at BC. Reed Harris obviously has a little bit more work to do, but he's still pretty good. The other 2 were excellent. You had them all become really good wide receivers. He was well respected by that wide receiver room. So it makes me wonder what happened. He was the assistant head coach too, so he was right up there. He also worked special teams. I saw him out there a lot during practices during the summer, helping with special teams work. He was a busy guy. I don't know if he's interested in going to another gig. I don't know if O'Brien just moved on him and they're going for somebody else. But this is a position that they're going to have to fill. And I'm going to say, just unlike the other 2, I have no idea who they could look at. And I don't want to hear about Wes Welker. There's all these guys out there that, Patriots are linked to the Patriots or whatever. I want a guy that can recruit the way that Wyatt could. And I want a guy that can, do the things that he does. So this one surprised me. I honestly, I think there were guys that I expected. I honestly going to say this. If you were to tell me that 3 guys got fired today or are gone today, I would have expected majority of them would be on the defensive side of the ball. I was surprised that a majority of them were on the offensive side of the ball. And folks have been saying to me too, like, what about Matt Thurin? Guys, special teams was pretty good this year. The punting wasn't great, got better. The kicking was outstanding. The kick coverage was good. And once you moved on from Isaiah Ferris as your kick and punt returner, you did much better. So he was doing mostly what you want him to do. I can get why you're bringing Thurin back. It wasn't that of anything that BC had going on this year, the 3 units. I thought special teams was the strongest. So I get that. So that was that last piece. And then additionally, on top of all these people losing their jobs, Burge Nigerian is also out. This was reported originally by Kevin Stone. I got it confirmed today. He's the chief of staff. He was the guy that was with Bill O'Brien. We talked about this earlier. He's gone. And as I said on the earlier show, if FanDuel had the odds for it, I would be putting my money on him going to UNC and trying to get Jordan Hudson away from Bill Belichick in terms of like on-field stuff and in program stuff. So I'm guessing that's where he's going to go. And I don't know who their chief of staff is going to be. So I think that was the last one. I also heard officially that Spencer Dickau was out as general manager. We knew that because of Kenyatta Watson as well. So that ends up the end of a chaotic day. It was crazy with that stuff. But honestly, I think there's no other portal news, which was pretty crazy. I would imagine too, we talked about Tim Lewis earlier. His son's on the team. I think we could all read probably where that's going to end up, but who knows? Maybe he loves BC. But I wouldn't be surprised if he enters the portal just because his dad's gone now. We'll have to wait to see what happens there. But this weekend, I'm guessing it's going to be quieter. You got BC basketball playing tomorrow. You got hockey playing tonight. I don't know. I wanted to get this out for you guys. Hopefully you're listening. Hopefully you're enjoying today's show. Make sure you hit that like and subscribe button and check me out again on YouTube, on Instagram, on TikTok. I'm on all sorts of social media, and check out my work at Eagle Insider. And we'll see you all again on Monday for another episode of Locked On Boston College, your team every day.